Alright, in this video I will show you how to do key registration properly. And what I mean with properly is that most of you might be familiar with the way to do it to get it to work with one key at a time. But as soon as you press two keys at once, things just go haywire. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So, what most of you know is that you can access the key code variable, which is an integer that represents what key is being pressed, or more precisely, what is the last key that was pressed, which might still be pressed right now. So that's as convoluted as it sounds, right? Because that doesn't really sound like something you want to know exactly. You just kind of want to know for every key on the keyboard whether or not it's pressed. But that's not the information you're getting. That's not exactly what key code is telling you. Right, so what happens when we use this will become clear shortly. I'll just set up a background and a rectangle that's displayed when we press the right key. Let's make that red. Just make it stand out. Alright, so I press right. And I stop pressing right, it's still there. Now I have to press another key, like W, and then it disappears. That's because, as I said, key code encodes the last key that's being pressed. Now some of you know an improvement over this and might think that just works great, which is that you include another native variable called key is pressed. And as the name suggests, that's just true whenever any key is pressed and false otherwise. Alright, well, now it seems to work, at least it works better, but I can still create situations in which this completely fails. Like when I press up first, now key is pressed is true, but I'm not pressing the right key. Now I press right, it's displaying it, and now I release right, but I'm still holding the up key. So now this condition right here is true, right? Because the last key that I pressed was right, and there's still some key being pressed, but it's not the right key. So I've tricked this into thinking that I'm sort of pressing the right key, but I'm not. So that's already enough to really say, okay, this is not working too great. But if you needed more evidence than that, you could have also tried adding another key. Right, so if we put another rectangle that pops up if we press the left key, now we notice we can never get them to show up at the same time. So it just never works if you have more than one key to register. So we can solve both of those problems at once. So really what we want to do is we want to store for every key whether or not it's being pressed. So we can make the key code, which is an integer already, so that's really easy. We can just get the key code to be an index of an array, and inside of that we store whether the key is pressed or not. So we make that array, we call it keys, right? We could call it key codes. It's not really storing key codes, it's storing whether it's pressed. So, you know, this is just kind of, this means, this needs some explanation perhaps, right? Is the key at index key code being pressed, right? And yes means true, no means false. That's kind of what this means. So that's maybe not that clear from the name, but it's hard to come up with a better name for it. And to actually set the values properly, we need to use yet another native function called keyPressed. And what we do inside keyPressed is we set the index we were talking about, the index key code, and when it's pressed we set it to true. But now we just have to make sure that when it's not pressed it's also set to false. So that we do with the keyReleased function, which, as the name suggests, is just called whenever you release a key. And then the key code inside of this function is represents the key that you're releasing, that you're now no longer pressing. So that means that key is now set to not being pressed, to false. Right, and then we can replace the conditions here with simply accessing the index, which in this case is the left key index, right? And here we use the right index. We don't have to use key is pressed anymore because that's encoded within this whole thing, right? We know that if this is true, that it's being pressed and that it's the right key. And now we notice we can press any sort of keys. I can press up, left, and release left. It doesn't matter. I can press both of them at the same time. And everything is registered perfectly, flawlessly, seamlessly. I can do that with as many keys as I want. So that's a much better way of doing it. And the nice thing about this is that it's so clean. Look at how clean that is. Just one line of code here. One line of code. Look at how simple these conditionals are. So not only have we done it perfectly, flawlessly, but also it's really clean. It's really easy to read once you get used to this. So that's just the best way that I know of doing key registration. Hope you guys found that useful.